So I know when I got promoted, I had in the Marine Corps, had a first sergeant who was really good at this part right here, where he got me a book, Marshall Goldsmith's "What Got You Here Won't Get You There." That's the author, right? And help break down that things aren't the same. You don't just keep doing what you were doing before. You actually have to make some changes that you might not have been ready for. So, what are some of those changes that people don't know that they're going to have to make going into a new leadership position, particularly first-time leaders?
As an overview of this transition, and especially the whole concept of Marshall Goldsmith's "What got you here won't get you there," right? You got to be a team leader probably because you're really good at the job you have to do. That you have a job description, there are those essential functions of that job, you are accountable, and you probably took ownership of that job. Being good at the job can actually be a deficit for a leader. And that sounds weird, I know, but it's really hard. If you've ever worked for someone who had the job that you had, or has the job that you had before you had it, right? They know it. They've done it. They've done it well. All the things you're trying to figure out, they've got figured out. So that can be a drag. You feel like, why am I even here? This person just tells me what to do, when to do, and how to do it. Get a robot. Leave me alone. So if you think about what it is that made you good at the job and what makes you a good leader, they're two very different things. Now, what I'm not saying is if you're really terrible at a job, you should be promoted to be the leader of the job. It's not what I'm saying at all. What I am saying is your job is to help other people be successful and not to show off yourself. Right. So I think that's the kind of the overview, or one of the first things to be aware of is you're going to measure success differently now. When you're a subject matter expert or you're that content person, you measure success by your ability to get those tasks done on time, under budget, effectively, efficiently, that sort of thing. Maybe even showing some innovation in how you do your work. But now your success is going to be measured by what other people do, not by what you do. Sometimes your success is measured by it will always be measured by what you do to help other people successfully accomplish the mission.
So what is the first thing? We have a list of 5, but what's number 1? The first thing someone should be concerned about when they're promoted to a new leadership position?
The first thing is to get a really good picture of what success will look like from your boss's perspective. And that's going to fall in a number of categories. You probably know what a KPI is. What are the key performance indicators? How is your boss going to measure success? How will you be evaluated? Another question is going to be, how do they like to communicate? What's the cadence of meetings? How much information should you be sharing at any given time? And you see both sides of the spectrum on this one, by the way. Oftentimes you will see someone who says, look, I don't need to read the whole book. Give me a summary. Sometimes people have to tell you don't have to tell your boss how much you know every time you talk to her. But you also need to know what are her expectations? What does he want to hear from you when you're giving a report? I like to understand what does the leader's dashboard look like, right? It's like you're driving a car. You don't have to know everything that's happening, the temperature of the wheel bearings. You don't have to know, you need to know how fast you're going. You want a warning to pop up if the engine or transmission's getting too hot. If you got a brake problem, you want an indicator that that's a problem, right? So what does the boss need to know at any given moment? And so what does his dashboard look like? So it's how much information. And I started to say, you could be at either side of that spectrum, giving way too much information. And I've heard that happen. I wish this person knew how to do an executive summary. Or giving not nearly enough, not communicating at all. Just in within the last 2 days working with clients, I've seen both of those happen. One owner of a company was very upset because there were some safety issues happening on a job site and no one let them know. There was even a customer concern that didn't get run up the ladder so that it could be dealt with at the right level. Found out about it later, which created embarrassment and some risk. Luckily, no harm other than a shot to your credibility, because as the leader of the company, you didn't know what was going on. And on the other end I was working with another company where extremely talented, high potential leader, very, very smart, always gives too much information, and the boss feels like she's tying up my time, and that's not an unusual thing either. So knowing what that needs to look like. Sometimes even right up front asking, how much do you need to know right now? I've got this information. How much of this do you need to know? And make it more of a dialogue than a lecture or a presentation. How formal or informal does that communication need to be? What's the frequency that you're going to meet? We'll have another one of these videos coming out talking about what should be in your weekly meeting. But there are a number of different kinds of meetings. There might be the daily catch-up meeting, the weekly tactical meeting, the quarterly strategic meeting. Understand the cadence of communication and the types of meetings that you'll be having with your boss. Understand that you're creating the culture. I had a colleague once who had a great question that she would ask her boss. She would sit down with the boss at the beginning of a period of time, right? Beginning of the year, beginning of the quarter, whatever. And she would say something like, let's say 6 weeks from now, you're sitting down and giving me feedback. And that feedback is, I have knocked it out of the park. You couldn't be more pleased with the job I've done. What did I do? What a great question.
Yeah.
So that ability to be proactive and saying, how are you going to measure success? What do you need to see from me? Is a great way to understand your boss's expectation.
Okay. You mentioned creating culture, and I think sometimes people don't realize that you're also creating a culture in your team, right? Your company culture is created one little team at a time. And so being intentional about that and purposeful about that is something I've seen some clients sort of stop and think about, like, oh, yeah, it's not just, and I say just, that it may not be the best word, but it isn't just the KPIs and the meetings. It creates a culture in your team that feeds into your bigger culture. And so what is the expectation for that?
Exactly right.
All right.
So one thing I'd like for every leader to understand. I don't care if you're a brand new team leader just coming out of your subject matter expert phase, or if you're becoming the CEO of the company, and we get to work with people throughout that entire spectrum. Something that every leader should understand is as a leader, you should never be a victim of low trust or bad culture. As a leader, it's your job to build trust and create culture. We've written a book about the 5 principles that leaders use to build culture. So that sounds good to say that, but how do you do it? And we've run into that a lot. So we've actually written a book about how do you build culture and build trust and create culture. So yes, I totally agree with that. That's something you should be mindful of from the very beginning.
All right. So what's number 2?
Number 2, understand what your team needs from you. So what does your team need from you? We have in our book what's called a stewardship assessment. You'll find that in the book it's called a team trust assessment. After we wrote the book, if I were rewriting it today, that's one thing I would change. Not because it doesn't assess or help you build trust in your team, it does, but it's more about your stewardship as a leader than it is my team worthy of my trust, right? That can create defensiveness and barriers if your team feels like you're trying to figure out if you can trust them. What this tool does do is it helps you understand, where is this person right now in their career? What do they need from you as their leader to successfully accomplish the mission that they've been given to do? So what you need to do there is gain an understanding of what kind of, does your team or do your team members as individuals, does each individual on your team need coaching in some way? Coaching is what you do to help people create alignment. And when I say alignment, I mean alignment with the values of the company, the mission of the company, and the vision of the company. Or is there any kind of a capability gap? Does this individual need some additional capability in terms of time, team, talent, or tool? That'll let you know if you need to provide resources in terms of assistance, in terms of finance or budget, in terms of training or technology. So there are a number of things that, if you tell someone they have to paint a room and they have no paint, no paintbrush, well, they could have all the best motives in the world and try as hard as they might. They're probably not going to get that room painted, right? So you need to provide the resources and help them have the capabilities, whether it's training them how to paint, providing the paint, giving them a budget so they can buy paint. Those are some of the things you need to be aware of. And then finally, you need to be aware, am I managing this person in a way that's appropriate for them? A while back, we did a video on management and leadership and how they work together. So with every individual, the balance of management and leadership needs to change. And by the way, it'll change over time for that same individual as they learn, as they grow, as they become more capable. So if you have someone who's been in the job a long time, knows what's expected of them, and you're following up with them all the time or telling them how to do their job, that's where people start to complain about micromanagement. And yet, that same level of management would be perfect and required if you have someone very new on the job. So you need to be able to understand the individuals that you lead and what they need from you to be successful at what they're being asked to do.
I think that's a big one. Is we get very caught up in I'm treating everyone equally, but that's not what they need. You can be a bad leader, or you can be an ineffective leader, not a bad leader, by treating everyone equally. Right? There's a little cartoon meme going around that says the difference between equity and equality. Equality, everyone gets the same box, but someone still can't see over the fence into the baseball game. Equity is the short person gets a couple boxes and the tall person doesn't need a box at all, right? And as a leader, if you're treating everyone the same, someone's not getting enough attention. Someone's getting way too much and thinks you're a micromanager. I think what you highlighted in the shift of the name for the stewardship tool from trust assessment is it's not about you. It's about them and what they need. You kind of have to check your ego at the door. And to be successful as a leader is helping other people succeed, not making yourself feel good. Even if you think you're doing the right thing. If I think I would like to be treated this way, but that person might not like that as well. It's not about you.
Great story I heard from another leader, his experience, not mine, but it's something that sticks with me, and I hope it does with you as well. He was talking about a time when he was a new leader, and he had one of the team members was given a pretty big assignment, and she did a great job. She was awesome. I don't remember what he said, if it brought on a great new customer or created some wonderful efficiency, but did something that moved the ball way upfield for them. And he was so thrilled with it. So he ordered balloons. He got a cake. He called everybody together. They literally threw a party for this person. And then when he was done, everybody separated back to their workstations, whatever they were doing, and he went to his office. And one of this person, we'll call her Susie, the person who was being celebrated. One of Susie's coworkers came to his office and said, "You blew it." And he said, "What?" He was sitting there feeling really proud of himself, and rewarding excellent work. And she said, "You blew it." Susie is in tears. She's packing up her desk. She's leaving. She's going to quit. He said, "What? What? Why would she do that? I just spent money on balloons and cake, and we had a party for her, and I gave her a card, and why would she quit?" She's incredibly introverted. She doesn't like attention. All that attention for her was terrifying. Now she can't bear to even be here anymore because of all the attention she got. And so it kind of goes back to what you were talking about. Being equal and being equitable are two very different things. So get to know the individuals. Understand who they are. How cool would it have been for Susie if he had quietly said, "Hey, here's a gift certificate for you and your spouse to go out and have dinner. Way to go. I'm going to send some flowers to your home." Or just send the flowers to her home, or whatever. What is her interest, right? Does she want to go to a concert? Does she who knows, right? He sure didn't know, and I don't know because I never met Susie, right? You don't know until you ask. So get to know people. Take the time to, and this actually this really goes into number 3. So I apologize I didn't give you a chance to ask the question of what's number 3?
What is number 3?
Thank you. Good job. Number 3 is diagnose before you prescribe, right? Understand, get to know the individuals. What are their expectations? How do things get done? I can remember one of the first times I was very young, I was put in charge of a crew or a group of people that had been peers up to that point. And I don't know, I don't know if I read a book or if I just received inspiration because I prayed hard because I didn't know what to do. I don't remember how I knew to do this. But here now it's a whole lot years later, and I would still give the same advice. I spent time with each member of the team And there were about 5 people. And wanted to get to know them, but I knew them well enough to know what they were good at. They each had a strength. One person was just better at the paperwork and organization and had the office kind of working as it should be and knew where all the forms were and knew the processes. That's never been my strength, even to this day. So I met with him and we talked, and I had him go through everything with me and teach me the processes. Boy, there's so much, and I did that with each individual. There's so much benefit to that. And here, let me tell you what some of those are. 1, got to know him better personally and reinforced his strength. 2, I learned something that made me better at my job. 3, I would ask, why do we do it that way? And he could tell me. Every once in a while, there are probably 2 or 3 things in the entire set of processes that we went through. And I said, well, why do we do that? And he said, I don't know. That doesn't really make sense to me. Okay. Well, let's talk about that. And I was able to help bring about change in areas that were meaningful for him and for the rest of the team, because we decided after a little bit of additional research, we really don't need to do it that way. There are better ways to do it. And I was able to ask him, how would you do that? And he said, well, I'd do it this way. It would make so much more sense. And so we did. And taking that time to let each person show you their strengths on the job, literally and sincerely learning from them. This is not a setup. It is not a manipulation. You're not trying to make people think you care about their opinion. Their opinions matter. And if you're smart, you're going to listen. So that process, I think, was really helpful to me as a new manager, because there are certain ways things get done that aren't in the handbook. And there are certain things in the handbook that ought not to be. So as a leader, you have that opportunity to do those 3 things, right? Learn, reinforce someone's strength, and maybe even bring about meaningful change, all in that one activity or exercise.
I think sometimes new leaders get caught up in that last bit. We want to bring about meaningful change. You want to leave a mark. We're going to come in, and this is the way. If they're a new leader, they want to prove themselves right away. If they're coming in from a different position, they're like, oh, we had these great ideas, or a different company. We did this such a great way over there, and this is how we're going to do it now. And they're wrong 90% of the time. Those are the ones who get, unfortunately, stories told about them, and their culture tanks.
That's called prescribing without diagnosing, and that's malpractice, right? I mean, so it applies to leadership. So there's another great book that I share with, I especially share it with people who are becoming executives, but it applies pretty nicely. You'll have to adapt for scope of time and complexity. But there's a book called You're in Charge, Now What? And in that book, one of the great pieces of advice that I have used in times in my past when I was moving into an executive role. One role I had was COO of a company, and it gives you a number of questions to ask in your first. Now, if you're going into a C-level executive role, probably 90 to 100 days. If you're going into a management position, maybe it's 20 to 30 days. You can judge that on how long you need to. But the principle behind it, regardless of the amount of time required, is taking the time to understand the lay of the land before you come out with your strategy. The other thing that does is it's a time of listening. It's a time of interviewing, of asking specific questions. And as you do those things, it allows, one, you're going to gain intelligence. You're going to be smarter. So your decisions are going to be smarter. How do you overstate that one? But also, you're gaining the intelligence by listening to people, and they feel valued by being heard and understand. So imagine this. Now I'm going to jump all the way to you've gone through this process. On one hand, you've never done this, you jump in with your strategy. On the other hand, you go through a process of listening, gathering intelligence, and then come out with a strategy. If I work for you, and you've done the first, where you come out with an immediate strategy, odds are you're clueless. I understand things about the job that you haven't even comprehended yet, and you kind of look like a fool. At the very best, you just look uninformed and ineffective, right? At the kindest. So that just doesn't go well. On the opposite end of that spectrum, you've taken the time, you've listened, you come out with your plan. I hear that plan. One, it makes more sense because it's a smarter plan, just in and of itself. Two, I hear my advice in your plan. I hear my voice in your plan. I know that you listen to me. Even if you come back and you say, John, I know you said these things, and I've thought about it, and here's how I want to do it a little bit differently than what you suggested. What do you think of that? That's a great conversation to have, right? And it's your call. You're the boss. It's okay. But at least I was heard. and I was understood, right? That is incredibly important in this third skill, that is that ability to diagnose before you prescribe, understand, right? Stephen Covey would call it seek to understand before you seek to be understood. The principle is applied and spoken of in many ways from many different leaders and teachers. The fact that you hear it so often in so many different ways is evidence that it's a sound principle in my mind.
All right. Number 4.
Number 4, understand that the world doesn't begin and end with you.
What?
Yeah, I know. That hurts. And it takes us time to get over that one. Yeah, right? Humility, humility, humility. Mm-hmm. With number 4, understanding that as a new supervisor or a new team leader, I'm stepping into someone else's world, and they've had other leaders before me. And really, hopefully, if I'm successful, they'll have other leaders after me if my goal is to grow and move up beyond this role. And that's my choice, right? Hopefully. So understand that you are part of someone else's career journey. One of the first tips for that is don't speak poorly of your predecessor. I don't care how bad of a job they did. Don't speak poorly of them. At the very least, only speak about moving forward. If I have, now, odds are your predecessor didn't do everything wrong anyway. They're probably just different. One of the ways you might handle that when you start a conversation with your new team and you see things that you are going to do differently. Remember the last point we just talked about. So your timing and how you come to this point is what we just discussed. But when you get to that point and you are going to make some changes, things that you see that need to be very different than the past, you might acknowledge, I know in the past we've done this. In the future, I want to measure it this way, or I want to change our focus to this, or I'm going to emphasize this a little more than we have in the past, and here's why. Circumstances change. It doesn't, so whatever has changed, that's not the point. The point is, I'm not saying you guys were so bad. It's a good thing I got here to save you from yourselves because you were doing a terrible job and your boss was a moron. So here I am, your hero, and I'm going to make life better for you. And right? So don't do that. It's tempting because, you're trying to impress everybody. You'll impress everybody, I promise you, but not in the way that you hope. So do not speak poorly of your predecessor and understand that you are people come with their own experiences and you are part of their journey and you're only a part of it.
And I like that you acknowledge the change. I think that's true. Even if you're making changes from your own, you realize I did something that maybe isn't the best way or has upset someone. And you acknowledge it, either with an apology, which might be warranted, or just a simple, hey, I know this is the way it was done in the past, and I think this is going to serve us better in the future, and here's why. I'd love your input. And then you move on. But switching things up without that explanation and acknowledgement just leaves people really lost and confused.
It really does. And I have been in that situation as a leader, in my case as a new executive, realizing that my leadership style was very, very different. Let me edit myself there because we already talked about your leadership style is not what you think it is, right? If you have one style of leadership, odds are 70% of the time you're going to be wrong because it doesn't apply to the individual you're leading or the circumstances you're leading in. So let me say my leadership philosophy, how I feel about building people up, strengthening them, creating cultures of accountability and allowing for ownership. These things are important to me as a leader, and they're important to probably you as well as a leader. So I have found even doing the things that I felt were right, even in retrospect, many years later saying, yeah, that was exactly what I would advise someone else to do. My error was in not letting people know that I know in the past you've done it this way, and here's why I want to do it this way moving forward. I think it will help you with your career better. I think you will come up with better solutions if I support your solutions rather than giving you mine all the time. Mm-hmm. When I have done that, people have been very grateful and even remembered it years later as a very important part of their career development. So even if you're doing all the right things to help someone develop their career, step up to their mission, and thrive, if you don't explain your motives, chances are there's something called a fundamental attribution error. You will hear me say this in other videos as well. It comes up a lot. Fundamental attribution error means that if someone doesn't know my motive, they're going to guess it. When they guess, they're going to very, very likely guess wrong. It's almost impossible to guess it right for some odd reason, because when they guess wrong, they're guessing negatively. They're guessing a negative motive. Why did they do that? Because they're a jerk. Why did he do that? Because he's selfish. Why did he do that? Because he's controlling. And when you can explain the motive, it just clears up a lot of headspace and a lot of negative emotion. So let people understand your motive. So that's part of that. I understand in the past it's been like this. In the future, let's do it this way, and here's why.
That's 4. Fifth and final one.
The fifth and final one is really kind of segues nicely, because just understand it's not a popularity contest. Don't try to be everybody's best buddy. You know, it's not about, I've actually worked with leaders who have gotten feedback. Don't go out drinking with your team. You say things and do things there as their pal that might backfire as their leader. You say things and do things that might create bon ami, right? That might create friendship of a type, but that might actually erode respect. So be mindful of that. Now, you can be close to the people you work with. You can care about them. I've worked with people who went too far the other way. Well, I never get close to the people I work with because I might have to fire them someday. If that's what you're thinking from the beginning, you got another problem altogether, right? So that is not what I am saying. I have myself, and I've seen some great leaders who have been excellent at going about listening to people. Some things we've talked about already just in this video: being in touch, understanding the individual, where do they come from, what are their strengths, that sort of thing. So just understand there's a difference between being liked and being respected. People will hopefully like you, but you need to earn their respect. You need to, even more than that, you need to earn their trust. And that's going to take some time, and it's not about popularity. So know the difference between liked and respected, and then understand what it takes to earn trust. Rather than going into a long description, I'm going to sell you a book at this moment, and I didn't mean to. But a lot of our book is about what does it take to earn trust? What are the character traits of a leader who creates healthy cultures and earns trust? So again, and the book is called Influence on Purpose, 5 Principles for Leaders to Build Regenerative Cultures, with, of course, both of our names on it, John Baker and Rebecca Eyre. So I would probably close with that and refer you to that for a whole lot more detail and some really useful tools as a leader.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Good conversation. Appreciate it.